We might get things underway. Welcome everybody to this webinar. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Alison Airy and I'm the CEO of ACBC in New South Wales. We're delighted to be doing this webinar today on the subject of what's going on in the shipping industry. When we entered COVID, I don't think anybody could have foreseen the level of disruption to the shipping industry. In fact, farmers over the weekend were saying that the cost of shipping was the equivalent of paying $35 for a Big Mac. So some really severe disruption happening in this industry, which of course is affecting trade with China. But we're really delighted to be collaborating with International Cargo Express today to tell us what's going on. So ICE, or International Cargo Express, is an independent freight forwarder that has 30 years experience in China, and both of our speakers from the company have got very extensive experience in freight, so well placed to talk about what's going on. Now, in terms of the format this morning, Alice and Ben will give us a presentation going into various aspects of the current environment. Then we will have the opportunity for questions and answers. So as we're going through in the presentation, if you do have questions, please put them in the Q&A function. And what we'll do is we'll read them out when we come to the end of the presentations. So with that, I might just hand over to Alice Farley, who's the branch manager and head of marketing, and she'll kick off the presentation. Alice, over to you.
Thanks, Alison. We're really happy to be here today as part of the Australia-China Business Council to talk to its members about the challenges that we've experienced in the shipping industry over the last 12 to 24 months. And what a 24 months it has been. As Alison said, we'll be talking for around 30 minutes and then we'll move to a question and answer session. So if you do have any questions, just note them down and put them in the chat at the end, and myself or my colleague Dan will be more than happy to answer. So as Alison explained, I'm Alice. I've been working in the logistics and import-export industry for over 11 years now. I'm originally from the UK and I migrated to Australia around 5 years ago. And my focus is really on getting to know our customers' supply chains to understand how we can best support their operations. I'll also introduce Ben. Ben, do you want to say a few words?
Thanks, Alison. Yeah, great to be here again. As stated, my name is Ben Mahalovic. I am the National China Development Manager for International Cargo Express. I have over 23 years experience in international shipping, working from South America, North America, Europe, Asia, and over the last 15 years, predominantly traveling to and from China, everywhere from Beijing down to Hong Kong. So yeah, very happy to be here today and looking forward to presenting to you all.
So International Cargo Express, we have, as Alison explained, over 30 years experience handling cargo across the globe. So we are a freight forwarding service provider, which means we manage import and export on behalf of our customers. We have an in-house customs brokerage team that can support with customs clearance and export handling. And our staff have in-depth industry knowledge working with us for significant periods of time. So our customers can be rest assured that we know how to handle that cargo. We also work with a highly experienced and professional agent in China who can work directly with your customers and suppliers, shipping lines and airlines to ensure you get the best services for your cargo and for your shipping plan. So if you import or export over the last 12 to 24 months, I can completely empathise with you about the myriad of obstacles you would have had to overcome when working in shipping. But do you understand how we got here exactly? Well, that's what we're going to cover today. The events that have impacted sea freight, challenges with ports in China specifically, equipment availability and vessel reliability, functions to deliver equipment into and out of the ports, the ongoing emerging cases of COVID-19, not only in China, but throughout the world, freight rates, air freight, export, and most importantly, what our fundamentals are when dealing with China to hopefully give you support with your future operation. So I don't know about you, but I've seen quite a bit of information in the news over the last 12 to 24 months about shipping. Obviously, Alison mentioned the Big Mac story today, but we want to share a small video with you that shows some of these insights direct in the news that you may have seen.
%99 of everything that comes in and goes out of Australia is by sea. Shipping is our lifeblood, and at the moment it's hemorrhaging. In the last year, the world has gone on a spending spree that's created a massive demand for ships and container space. And it's driving the price of Australia's imports and exports through the roof. The cost of bunker fuel and huge delays and congestion in ports around the world has the industry in a tangle.
Shipping companies have cancelled trips to some ports to speed up journeys, and not enough containers are being manufactured. Shipping Australia boss Melwin Narunha says Australian ports must take some responsibility.
There's a buildup of these empty containers right across the world because of port congestion. And I think port congestion needs to be looked at very carefully.
Some vessels have been unable to dock in China because of trade tensions. And a blockage in the Suez Canal by a huge container ship in March has added to delays.
So that provides you with a really top-level overview of some of the events we've seen in the news. But this will provide you with a bit more of a breakdown of exactly how we got here. And to understand that, we really need to move back to March 2020, when the COVID-19 pandemic hit pretty much all over the world. As a consequence, demand for shipping services dropped dramatically. The same with airline services, as basically all airline operations almost stopped overnight. As a result, the shipping lines considered what they could do to manage this market. With risk of less containers on their vessels, they decided to introduce what we call blank sailings, effectively cutting services from the market because they were concerned they didn't have the demand to support the vessel operations. In fact, by April, we saw an increase of 435 blank sailings, and air cargo capacity fell by 91%. Now, this was initially a relatively good idea. We didn't have many orders coming through. Everyone was sort of watching the economy to see what would happen with the COVID-19 pandemic. However, come June, what we didn't expect was a sharp increase in demand for consumer product. People across the world, suddenly working from home, suddenly in lockdown, started to consider, well, maybe I'll do a renovation, maybe I'll bring in more product to upgrade my home. And this led to a significant rise in container demand against the backdrop of sailings that we no longer had. Now, with the airline industry also reducing their cargo because of the COVID-19 pandemic, we suddenly didn't have any flights to move cargo via air. So a lot of people were also moving to sea freight as an alternative. So we have a very pressurized situation at the back end of last year in the sea freight industry. And as the video said, what happens next? Well, we see union strikes in the ports in Australia. And that hit us in September, which is about the start of our usual peak season. The port strikes meant that we couldn't actually process as many containers through the wharf at the normal speed that we would be able to, and started to increase this backlog of containers at the port, particularly empty containers that needed to be repositioned back to countries such as China that needs the equipment to export. By October, the container imbalance grows. So we had, as the video mentioned, we had a buildup of empty equipment at container parks. And we also had a reduction of available empty equipment at usual importing countries such as China. By the end of 2020, things were looking pretty dire. And as we turned into a new year, what happens next? Well, we all saw the vessel Ever Given got stuck in the Suez Canal, bringing global trade routes to a halt. I think it was stuck for around 8 days and affected most people that were importing and exporting to and from Europe. So on from there, as we move into May, we start to see more COVID-19 outbreaks in China. We had one in southern China, which resulted in large congestion because 3 of our major shipping lines, OOCL, COSCO, and CMA, cancelled more than 20 vessels. Similarly, across the seas in Europe, MSC and CMA would not accept further bookings into Australia because of the congestion here in Australia. As you can see, this is a real compounding issue, which begins to get bigger and bigger as the year goes on. And then July 2021 happens, and we get more COVID-19 outbreaks in New South Wales and, of course, Victoria. Now, as a result, the New South Wales government slashed the number of airplane passengers allowed into Australia as a temporary measure from 6,000 to 3,000. That again reduced the amount of airlines that we had available to transfer cargo. And 90% of cargo that moves into or out of Australia on a plane goes on the belly of a passenger plane. And therefore, these flights and their non-operation was really impactful for the industry. As we moved into the recent months, September, we hit typhoon season. It's something that we used to every year, and we can normally expect a couple of days delay. But on the backdrop of all this other congestion that we're facing, becomes extremely problematic. And here we are today in October. Port congestion has reached new records, with vessels waiting to berth in both China and the US. Ben will now give you a bit of an overview of what's happening on the ground in China.
Yeah, thanks, Alice. I guess the easiest way to discuss the port in China is to put them into 3 categories: northern ports, central ports, and the southern ports. Northern ports of Dalian, Tianjin, Qingdao have been impacted the most by all of the issues Alice has just spoken about. Lack of equipment, the highest ocean freight rates, and the highest percentage of vessels omitting those ports. And that has put real strain on both customers and suppliers in the northern part of China. The central part of China, Shanghai, Ningbo, Xiamen, have come in and out of good times and bad. Most recently, Xiamen and Shanghai have had issues around COVID, which has put delays and pressure on shipping out of those ports. But in general, things are relatively stable for the industry that we currently live in. For southern China, Shenzhen, Hangzhou, Hong Kong ports, these are the ports that really have bounced back the quickest. The cheapest ocean freight in China come from the southern China ports. The equipment is more readily available in the southern China ports. However, some of the vessels are still omitting some of those southern China ports, as Alice mentioned, with regards to outbreaks and typhoons that have gone through those areas. So all the ports, while they still have their issues, southern China is the best area of China at the moment to be importing from. So if you are looking at potential suppliers in China, southern China would be an area that I would concentrate on.
Thanks, Ben. So alongside that, we have equipment and vessel reliability to consider. So vessel schedules are currently having roughly a 36% reliability rate. That means, unfortunately, more often than not, your cargo will be delayed or not arrive on the vessel that you're expecting it to arrive on. Also, the number of times that you need to interact to move your cargo has grown substantially. For example, gone are the days where you could place a booking with your agent or with your partner, receive a booking confirmation, and then receive a confirmation that your goods have sailed. For example, I have spoken to a customer around 36 email exchanges on one booking due to vessel reliability, equipment no longer being available, changes of equipment, changes of schedule, and then once we've got the schedule, further delays due to typhoons. That's a substantial amount of communication just to get your cargo moving through the supply chain. So it's really challenging for importers and exporters to manage their customers' expectations in this market. Surprisingly, however, the trucking operations in China are running relatively well considering the environment. We would advise customers to place a booking at least 2 weeks in advance for your trucking, for your container to arrive, to get collected from the port. We will pick up a container around 7 days before departure, and we will need to deliver that container around 5 days back to the port. Once again, however, we do see challenges. If we plan to deliver that container 5 days out and your vessel gets delayed, we will need to put your container into storage before the port can accept it. And that actually just it introduces further costs for the importer and further delays, unfortunately. We also have the emerging cases of COVID-19. So COVID-19, like much of the world, is still present and emerging in China and other parts of the world. In June, we probably saw one of our worst outbreaks in China at the port of Yantian. So relevant areas were suspended from operation and all vessels which were already berthed in Yantian ceased operation. This caused massive space and equipment challenges. So clients that had bookings to come out of Yantian had to rebook to export their goods from Shikao. However, space was cut by around 30%. So you have less space, more demand, congestion is a compounding issue. Late August, we also had an outbreak in Shanghai of COVID-19 at the airport. And in September, we had an outbreak in Xiamen as well. So we're seeing these continual outbreaks and having to navigate through them in this really challenging market. Now, one of the questions on most of our customers' minds at the moment is, what does this mean for rates? What does it mean I'm going to have to pay to get my equipment into or out of Australia? Well, unfortunately, shipping lines have been increasing rates with general rate increases almost every month since this pandemic began. The current rate as a guide is around $4,500 US for a 20-foot container and $9,500 for a 40-foot container. Now, if that made you take a deep breath and think these prices are astronomical, I wanted to give you a bit of a comparison and a bit of perspective on what's going on with the rest of the world. Down the bottom here, I've listed some rates from China to the US, China to Canada, and China to Europe. As you can see, those rates are considerably higher than the route from China to Australia. So that actually makes the Australian market for the shipping lines not actually that lucrative compared to other trade lanes. So what's happening? Well, some shipping lines are deciding to cut services and to put their services going to Europe or to the US instead because they can achieve higher rates. This then compounds the space issue that we're continuing to face. Some freight forwarders have tried innovative ways to tackle this problem, such as renting feeder vessels from China to the US by themselves. Alibaba actually tried to do this but ran into a few problems. And another forwarder has turned to break bulk vessels for container movements. They're not designed for this sort of movement, and equally they have run into problems. This does mean that we're pretty much beholden to the shipping lines, and they're holding the power with these bookings. And you need to be aware of that when placing it with your freight forwarder or your partner. What about air freight and exports? So exports from Australia are less problematic than imports in the current market. Costco Shipping Line, they're offering really reliable services in space. So if you are looking to export to China, speak to your partner about working with Costco. For air freight, Singapore Airlines and China Airlines are the two main airlines offering air freight to China. They, again, have pretty reliable services and space available. However, take a look at the difference in pricing on an import and export between China and Australia with the same airline. So currently a rate from Sydney to Shanghai is around $3.50 per kilo for over 500 kilos. For the same shipment from Shanghai to Sydney, you're looking at US $7.45, which roughly converts to 10 Aussie dollars. So you can see there's this massive increase in import charges than there is in export charges. So if you're working in this market, what do we recommend to do? Well, it's challenging for everyone, but here's a few pointers that I would suggest, and then Ben's going to give you some market predictions to finish up. So number one, flexibility is key. The market is moving extremely fast. Be prepared to pivot as required and do not lock your business into tight deadlines unless they are completely unavoidable. Number two, relationships are so important. Work with someone who knows the market and has good relationships in China to ensure that you can get the bookings that you're after. Number three, I hate to say it, but the highest bidder wins in this market. You need to get comfortable with how much the freight prices have increased, because unfortunately, as you can see through the contrast with the Europe and the US market, the pricing is considered relatively low in the current environment. Premium services are out there and are available. So if you are able to increase your budget for shipping, that is something that I would encourage you to consider. Number four, think outside the box. And this is really where working with a professional can help you. For example, if you normally move equipment from China into Brisbane, you may want to consider routing your cargo through Townsville. I've recently done it for one of our customers here and saved them a significant amount of money. However, you do need to talk to your professional advisor about this, because if you route through Townsville, you have different things to consider. Firstly, the transit time is significantly higher to come into Townsville than into Brisbane. The pricing is cheaper, but you also then need to get the container from Townsville potentially down to Brisbane, which would go via rail freight. And then the empty container needs to be de-hired back in Townsville. So you need to pay for the rail down to Brisbane, empty the container and get it back up to Townsville. And also you only normally have around 7 days with an empty container to do this. So factor that in, because you could be introduced to additional charges if you haven't planned that really well with your partner. Also, non-operating reefers are another option. So when equipment was tight, we were transferring some of our customers from general containers to non-operating reefers. These offer, again, a cheaper rate because we use reefers here for our export market. However, you do need to bear in mind that there's a refrigeration unit inside the container, which takes up space. So we have a container guide that we'd be happy to send any of you if you're wanting to know roughly how much you can fit in one of those reefers. So I'm now going to hand over to Ben. Ben's going to give you a bit more information about what we predict is going to happen in the next 12 months.
Thanks, Alice. I guess from an air freight point of view, the first thing is we're hopeful that the airlines will get back to the skies sooner rather than later. Qantas have announced plans to get back to international flights by mid-November. We are hopeful that other airlines follow suit in this area, because obviously more services in the air means more competitive rates for us and our customers. The second thing with air freight to look into, I think, is going to be hubs. I think that's going to be a critical thing moving forward, is looking at which hubs open up. I think that you'll find that there'll be certain countries that will allow travel before others. Example, I think, will be Singapore. I think Singapore will be one of the hubs to open up first. So looking at airlines like Singapore Airlines that will come from mainland China, Hong Kong, through Singapore to Australia will be an option. With regards to the sea freight market, again, I think this is something that may take a little bit longer to get back to pre-COVID levels. We are currently going through our peak season. We are also coming into February, which will be the Chinese New Year. So this period for Australia is usually our peak season and puts the most pressure on the services that are available. Once we do get through that Chinese New Year period in February next year, I am very hopeful that the market will start to bounce back. Between February and June next year is where we really want to start seeing services become more available, the world getting back to some normality with international movements, and the freight rates start to get back down to pre-COVID levels. Because as we're all aware, these levels that are currently in the market are not sustainable. With regards to the export market, this is something that we're hopeful that the import or the current import restrictions in China on Australian products will be lifted soon. I'm very much aware of traveling, having traveled to China, how popular the Australian products are. Wine, food, skincare, healthcare. These products are very popular all throughout China. And we are hopeful that these import restrictions will be lifted sooner rather than later, so that our exports can again get back to pre-COVID levels. Thank you, Alice.
So just a few final recommendations then as well before we hand over to a Q&A session. So Ben, do you want to run through this?
As we mentioned, Alice and our marketing team here at ICE Cargo are constantly putting out information on what is happening in the industry. So it's very important that you connect to International Cargo Express, if you like, social media pages, so that you can stay up to date with what the latest information is and what is happening here in Australia and in China. If you have that information and the latest information, it allows you to pivot quickly and make decisions in the best interest of your cargo. As Alice has mentioned previously, placing your orders in advance, even telling your current supplier 3, 4, 5 weeks in advance, there's nothing wrong with that. It allows everybody to pre-book where possible. It allows people to speak with your suppliers and get the cargo and organise for that cargo to be picked up in a timely fashion. Just lastly, from a final recommendation, as part of the China Chamber of Commerce, we're offering a free consultation to anyone part of the network. If you would like us to review your supply chain, your current costs, and how you are working in with your suppliers throughout China, please get in contact with me, and we offer a free consultation to anyone part of the chamber. And we look forward to question and answer time now, and hand it back to Alice.
Perfect.
Well, thank you very much, Ben and Alice. That was a really fascinating overview of what's going on and why it's going on. It's a case of a perfect storm. Whatever could go wrong did go wrong, but it's good that there does seem to be light at the end of the tunnel. So we will open it up for Q&A. If you do have questions, please put them into the Q&A function. We've got them coming in now. The first question that we have is, can you share some insights on which industries are most affected by the disruptions?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any one specific. I mean, I think this is a world crisis. It's not impacting one less than the other. I guess the only thing that you can really take from that is more on the local side of things here in Australia, if there are industries that maybe shut down more than others. Due to the lockdowns that we've had to endure here in Australia. As far as manufacturing goes in China, I don't think there's any one industry that will be more harmful than others in regards to that. So that's how I would look at that part.
Yeah. I would add to that, if that's okay, Alison, that we've noticed here locally that industries that are really pushed by tight deadlines. So, for example, our retail customers that want to get product before Christmas, it's a really difficult time for them, because if they hit those, if they don't hit those deadlines, then their product won't be on the Christmas shelves in David Jones, Myer, the like. Also, the construction industry. The construction industry tends to work to really tight deadlines. So, if you think of big, large-scale projects, any delays that we see through the shipping scenario that we're experiencing at the moment is really problematic and can often lead to additional charges for such industries by their customers when they miss their deadlines.
That's a good segue into one of the questions that we received, which is what's the impact that this all has on Christmas?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I mean, as Alice mentioned, there's going to be some issues around, the deadline of getting product into store. A lot of the main retailers that do have or have previously had a deadline on when product can be in their store to be available for their customers. That's going to put a huge impact. I think if you haven't bought your Christmas presents, I certainly suggest that you head out there in the next month and start shopping, because with all of the issues we've been speaking about with I guess with regards to shipping delays, I guess also with the energy issues at the moment in China, that's going to put a bit of an impact on the suppliers' ability to manufacture goods at the moment. And obviously, what we see here from the delays in some union strikes at the ports here in Australia, and then obviously the delays that we have from the lockdowns that we have here in Australia. So I think if we put all those four things together, that's going to be put huge delays into what's going to happen around Christmas, and I think we're going to see a real shortage of product to purchase, especially once we get to December. I think if people haven't got their products into store by end of October, early November, it may be too late to get in by the Christmas time. So yeah, certainly suggest the earlier the better for Christmas shopping this year.
Yeah. You've mentioned port congestion in Australia. Somebody has asked, what does this look like at the moment? Do you have any sort of overall insights or perhaps forecasts of what will happen in terms of that port congestion in Australia?
Yeah, certainly that actually has eased over the last few weeks here in Australia. Most of the ports around Australia are back to operating at relatively normal levels. So the port congestion of having vessels out and sitting out in the bay is not happening around Australia with the main ports like it was 6 months ago. What we do see at the moment, though, is some industrial action with the unions, and that is actually putting some delay on cargo once it arrives at port. So, you could expect to maybe add anywhere between 1 to 3 days of delay once the cargo is actually in port. But that will be due mainly to some of the industrial action that I said that we're starting to see at some of the ports around Australia. So again, the ACCC have got involved in the last couple of weeks to investigate what is happening at the Australian ports and to also investigate what's happening with the freight rates. So I'm hopeful that with their intervention into these issues that, we can avoid any further delays, especially over the next few months while we come into our peak season and into our Christmas period. And this is something that hopefully that we can see an easing of, because I think everybody would be fully agreeable that the last thing we need after everything we've been through in the last 12 to 18 months is further delays once the cargo actually arrives at the port due to union strikes or something along these lines.
Now we've got another question here about the causes of the delays, and the question is anything being done to tackle the container and equipment shortage problem? And if so, is this something that can make a difference in the short term, or is it really more about the long term?
I don't think it's something that can be fixed in the short term. I think this is something that we're going to have to live with for the next 3 to 6 months until we start to see the market get back to some normality, and we also start to see the European and the North America market get back to normality as well, because we need those areas of the world to get those containers back into circulation and get those containers back into mainland China to give us the equipment availability and the volume of equipment that we need throughout those areas. I don't think there's anything short term that's going to be able to impact or improve that area. So I don't think that you should be banking on something along those lines happening. I think, as both Alice and I have mentioned today, I think it's very important that we are aware that these issues are there and that we can plan around these issues rather than wait for something in the short term to be done about the equipment availability.
Yeah. Now, a question from someone who seems to be following things quite closely in terms of leading indicators. Would falling rates between China and the US and Europe likely result in more capacity coming back on the Australia-China route? The questioner said we've started to see some pulling back on price between China and the US in the last week. Does that mean that perhaps the forecast could be a little bit brighter in terms of the China-Australia route?
Yeah, no, correct. As I said, this week we started to see some reductions in pricing from southern China, especially to Australia. And I think on the back of that as well, I think Alice spoke about some of the freight rates between Europe and North America. And I think we've started to slowly see those rate levels come down as well. So this is something that, I think will impact the Australian market. Again, I don't think it's going to be something that happens or has an impact within the next week or 2 weeks or even the next month or two. I still think it's a slow burn for us all with shipping here in Australia. But it is and does give us hope that once we see the bigger markets in North America and Europe start to get back to some kind of normality and head back in the right direction, obviously that's going to flow for some of the smaller markets which Australia falls into.
Yes, it's at least going in the right direction, isn't it? If the prices were going up, there'd be even more cause for concern. Now, a different type of question. This one is about managing foreign exchange and currency exposure. Have you got any tips on managing this, especially given unanticipated rises in freight costs? And the second part is, as a company, how do you manage these types of risks?
I guess from that point of view, I guess there's not a great deal that can be done. The rate levels are where they are at the moment, saving half a point here or there, really in the scheme of things, is probably not going to have a great impact on the business. If you are a high volume customer, I guess one of the things I can suggest would be to look at paying in foreign currency, to pay in US dollars. That would be something that I would be looking into, especially if you are a higher volume customer. Again, this is something that we spoke about before, about being up to date with the latest information. I think that just falls into the category of, again, you need to be up to date daily with what is happening with both your freight rates as well as what is happening with exchange rates around the world as well. Again, we're talking, $9,000, $10,000 for a container. I don't think you're going to find the saving that you need with exchange rates and percentages here. I think we just need to live with the levels that we have at the moment. And as I said, hopefully wait until we get through to that Chinese New Year next year and post that as well.
Yep. Now, I just wanted to pick up on a figure that really jumped out at me in your presentation, and that was you said that there was a 36% reliability rate. Could you just explain what that means and what the implications of that are?
Yeah, certainly. So normally we would provide a vessel schedule to our clients with a ETD and ETA into Australia. And pre-COVID, you could be confident that they would operate about 90% reliability. So we're giving you some dates. It's very likely that those dates aren't going to change, maybe 1 or 2 dates. But now that's completely gone out of the window. So we're getting a schedule and the ETDs and ETAs are changing sometimes multiple times a day. It's actually really challenging in our industry to maintain that communication and to ensure that clients are informed of changing deadlines, because the deadlines are changing so frequently. And the reason behind that is because the vessels are anticipating delays. So they know that there's X amount of vessels waiting to berth in a port. And so they make a prediction on when their vessel is going to be able to be unloaded. And then that keeps shifting. And then you may get into a situation where the client has decided that they want to go with a completely different schedule entirely. We can't get equipment on that vessel that we wanted, and we're going to have to move again. So that 36% reliability, as unfortunate as it is, means when you get that specific date initially, that it will be subject to change. And now sometimes we will give an estimated time of departure, and then in brackets say estimated delay till another date. So it's going to depart on the 12th of October. We estimate it will delay to the 16th. And then that can change multiple times. This is really challenging for customers, but also really challenging for your partners as well, to make sure that we can keep you as informed as possible.
Speaking of delays, one of the delays is as a result of COVID-related shutdowns in Chinese ports, and you mentioned this in your presentation. With vaccination rates rising in China, do you think this is going to continue to be a feature of China moving forward, or as those vaccination rates go up, do you think China will no longer take that really drastic action of closing ports down?
Yeah, I guess we're hopeful that, China, just like everywhere in the world, once the vaccination rates increase, that means that hopefully we can start to get back to some kind of normal life, and that's exactly the same in the shipping industry as well. China has certainly had their challenges with Shanghai airport, Shanghai port, Xiamen recently, Yantian a few months ago. But the Chinese have been obviously excellent in working around that as best possible to minimise the amount of delays that are there. But China's no different to any other country around the world with that. I think it's just once the vaccination rates increase, and I guess we learn to get back to living with COVID in some sense, that this is just something that we will see, as I said, for the next 6 to 12 months, and maybe even a little bit longer than that. But hoping that as of this summer period, because obviously this would mean that northern and southern hemispheres would have gone through at least 2 summers by the time we get into the middle of next year. And then obviously it gives us another 6 months of getting people vaccinated. We're getting through the worst of it, and obviously it's going to be a positive outcome for everybody there.
Yeah. Now, somebody has asked me about the role of policymakers in addressing this issue. Do you see there being anything that governments can do further to address the current distortions in the shipping industry?
I guess we spoke about it previously as well in the presentation about international hubs. And I think that is going to be probably one of the critical things moving forward. And that's going to be something that we're going to rely on our governments to organise. And I think if we can look at countries that have a high vaccination rate, warmer temperatures, and have really been able to handle the COVID situation quite well, I think they're the places in the world that are going to open up first. And I think they're the places where that we can connect to first. And I think if we can connect through certain hubs, whether that be Hong Kong and Singapore, and I think, especially I think those two areas of the world will be the connectors for us here in Australia. We really need our politicians to work with the governments in those areas to work on the solutions of opening up quickly, so that airlines can get back to servicing those routes, so that the shipping lines can get back to servicing those routes. Because the quicker that they do that, the more space becomes available, the rates become competitive again, we can start to get back to what we know as normal shipping.
Yep. So it's really the shipping issue that needs to come first in terms of the intervention of government. Once that sees a bit more normalcy, then is it the case that shipping will follow?
Yeah, I mean, it could be the other way around. I mean, as I said, I mean, it's that the shipping can certainly be helped if we open up hubs early. As I said, I mean, I'm using Singapore as an example today because I believe Singapore could be one of those hubs. If the governments in Singapore and Australia get together and discuss those plans and put some planning in place around ease of transfer of cargo, that's where we can really open up and help the shipping industry. I think that's something that I think that the governments can really jump in now and really start to be planning for those things, so that they can help the shipping industry get back to some kind of pre-COVID level.
Yeah. Now, I'm desperately trying to find a silver lining in this. One of the positives, I suppose, is that freight rates between China and Australia are so much lower than between China and other parts of the world. I know that brings its own complications, but also export rates are so much cheaper than import rates. Does this mean that there actually is an opportunity for exporters to reduce at least their relative costs compared with competitors in other markets, or am I being completely naive?
I mean, it's again, it's a two-part to that. I mean, firstly, we need the current import restrictions on Australian products to be lifted, so that allows us to get back to shipping those products back throughout the world and allow the industry to recover from that point of view. So there's that part of it. Then there's also then going to be the freight part of it, and the cost of getting that freight back to your customers around the world. Predominantly in Australia, because of the way we are predominantly an import country compared to an export country. Export rates have always been relatively cheap compared to imports. Pre-COVID, you're looking at air freight rates of $1, $2 a kilo back to Asia and back to China. At the moment, as Alice mentioned before, we're around the $3 or $4 US mark. So we still need the rates to be coming down by having more services back in the industry, but even our export rates are not yet at the level they were pre-COVID either. So yeah, we need those two things to happen: the industries to open up and more services to get back to the market to allow us to get that competitive rate back to for suppliers to sell their product throughout the world.
Yeah. Now, relatedly, we've got someone who's asking about trade finance, someone looking for trade finance support. Do you have a provider you work with, or any suggestions about how to go about finding trade finance support for exporters?
No, that's something that I think we would probably be best to take offline with that. And if you could grab their details, Alison, and we can certainly provide that information directly to those people that request that.
Yeah. Okay, so if you'd like to put your details in the chat, we can connect you with ICE, but in either case, we'll be sending around details so you can connect directly on that question. Related to export again, what impact is this having on e-commerce? Because I know in terms of the Australia-China trade relationship, e-commerce is something that is still holding up quite well. What impact are these disruptions having on e-commerce?
Yeah, I guess e-commerce is in the same mould as the rest of the imports that we have into our country. The only advantage with that, I guess, I think people are at home at the moment buying more online, which is really helping that industry sustain the levels that they need to get through this COVID issue. There are still delays with shipping, and there's still delays with air freight, and the prices obviously for e-commerce will increase because of that. However, I think it's an industry that is still very strong, as I've said. I mean, I think that's probably one of the biggest industries here at the moment for Australia is that e-commerce, and that's still coming from China. As I said, as Alice mentioned before, some of the industries that have been impacted, the construction industry, etc., that have been hit by this COVID downturn. And then there are industries like e-commerce that really haven't. People are sitting at home with nothing to do and more money at the moment, and they're buying more products online, which really boosts that e-commerce trade. So while rates are still high and the services are still delayed, that's obviously an industry that is getting through this situation, and one that I think will come out the other end of it even stronger, and we will just continue to see more and more of that in the future.
Yep. Looking to the future, you've mentioned mid next year is the time you think the situation will return to normal. Will we see an overcorrection in the market where too much capacity is put on, and then we in fact have quite a dramatic lowering of shipping rates? What's your view on that?
I think the shipping lines obviously have a very good history now of what happened pre-COVID and what the levels were like pre-COVID.
Right.
And they also have a very good understanding of what's happened during the last 12 to 18 months. So I don't anticipate that to really be too much of a factor. I believe the shipping lines will slowly bring those services back into the fold, which won't bring that sudden impact of services, which would allow something like that to happen. As I said, I think they have enough information on the volumes that are currently moving around the world and have pre-COVID, that they'll be able to manage that. And I think, as I said, I think they'll slowly bring those services back into the fold from the December, February period onwards and moving forward. So I don't think there's going to be an immediate impact. I think it'll be a slow burn from February next year through to June, July next year. I think that'll be the period that we start to see the improvement. And hopefully sooner rather than later, we get back to that pre-COVID level.
Yep. And I see NAB, who works with you, ICE Cargo, has got in touch saying that they can help out with trade finance. So thank you very much. That's great use of the chat function there for people on the line to connect. We do have a little bit of time left. If people have any last questions, please do send them through in the last few minutes. If not, I just would like to say to ICE Cargo, thank you so much for presenting to us today. I think it's just a matter of waiting out the difficult times, but you've given some great tips on what companies should do in the interim as things return to normal. Did you want to, each of you, just give your one last piece of advice to leave people with, and then if there are no further questions, then we can wrap things up for today.
Great. I think from my point of view, it's really staying in touch with what's going on in the world, and I think it's information. I think that is critical at the moment. Your ability to connect with, as I said before, forwarders like ICE Cargo that sends out a huge amount of information through our social media pages, that you are able to connect, you are able to stay up to date daily with what's happening in the market, because I think information is the key. If you have the information and you know what is happening, you can really work around those issues, and you can plan to move forward through those issues. So for me, it's really about having that information on hand straight away to make those urgent and quick decisions.
Yeah, and from me, it's really about thinking outside the box as well. So talk to your forwarding partner. Let's look at solutions that are going to work for you. Because some businesses have had success when going down different avenues against their normal import-export portfolio. So starting to think about using those non-operating reavers, going into Townsville, doing things that aren't the norm to see if that works for you. So communicate with your partner, tell them what you're after, and they'll be happy to look at a solution. Equally, we'll send our details after this presentation and a bit of a guide of what we've talked about today. I'm happy to help anyone who needs it.
Great. Well, thank you very much to Ice Cargo. Now, just before you leave to our audience, we will be launching a poll. So if you could just take a few seconds to answer that poll, that would be very useful for us. If you're not ACBC members, we'd love to have you as part of our network. We are a group of businesses who have very deep expertise about all manner of things you need to know about in terms of doing business in China and succeeding in that market. We're having our annual general meeting on Wednesday this week from 5:30. So if you want to come along and learn more about what we do, what we did last year and what we're planning moving forward, please come along to that. We will add your details to our database so that you are able to receive notices from us of our upcoming events. So we don't have any further questions, but we did get through quite a few during the session. So we might close things here. Thank you once again to everybody. And for those in New South Wales, which I guess is most of us, happy Freedom Day. Hope you enjoy your new freedoms, but of course, make sure to stay safe as well. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.